The stench of whiskey and desperation hung thick in the saloon air when Delilah Jordan first realized her father had dragged her there to sell her like a horse at auction. And the knowledge hit harder than any slap she had ever received from his calloused hands. She stood beside the poker table in her faded calico dress, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, watching as her father Henry Jordan leaned across the scarred wooden surface toward a man whose breath reeked of rot and whose eyes held nothing but cruelty. It was September 1878 in San Jose, California, and the gold rush dreams had long since faded, leaving behind desperate men clinging to the dregs of fortune. The saloon called the Golden Spur had seen better days, its paint peeling and floorboards sticky with spilled liquor. Delilah was 20 years old and had spent the last 5 years caring for her father after her mother died of consumption, cooking his meals and mending his clothes while he drank away every cent they had. She had known he was in debt to dangerous men, but she never imagined this. "She is young and strong," Henry said, his words slurring together. "She can cook and clean, and she will not give you any trouble. That should cover what I owe you plus enough for a bottle of your finest whiskey." The man across from him was named Silas Gant, a cruel trader who dealt in everything from stolen cattle to human misery. His yellowed teeth showed in what might have been a smile. "Your debt is $50, Jordan. This girl better be worth it." Delilah felt her stomach twist into knots. $50. Her entire life reduced to a number that her father could drink away in a month. She opened her mouth to protest, but Henry shot her a warning glare that made the words die in her throat. She had learned long ago that speaking up only made things worse. The other men at the table watched with varying degrees of interest. Most seemed content to mind their own business, but one man at the far end sat differently than the others. He was younger than the rest, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that fell slightly into his eyes and a lean, muscular build that spoke of hard work rather than idle gambling. His hat sat on the table beside a modest stack of coins, and his blue eyes held something Delilah had not seen in a long time, genuine concern. "Now hold on just a minute," the young man said, his voice cutting through the negotiations with quiet authority. "You cannot just sell a person like this." "It is not right." Henry Jordan laughed bitterly. "Mind your own business, Cowboy. This is between me and Silas." "I am making it my business," the cowboy replied, standing up slowly. He was tall, probably over 6 feet, and despite his youth there was a confidence in his bearing that made even Silas Gant shift uncomfortably. "What is the total you are asking for the girl?" Silas narrowed his eyes. "50 for the debt, and I was going to throw in a bottle." "Call it 55 total." The cowboy reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. Delilah watched in stunned silence as he counted out bills with steady hands. "I will give you $165, triple what you are asking, but the girl goes free, completely free. No debts, no obligations, no claims on her whatsoever." The saloon had gone almost silent now, everyone watching the exchange. Henry Jordan stared at the money with wide, greedy eyes. Silas Gant looked less pleased, clearly having had other plans for Delilah, but even he could not deny that much money. "You are serious?" Henry asked, reaching for the bills. The cowboy pulled the money back slightly. "I need to hear you say it. She is free. You have no more claim to her, and neither does anyone else in this room." Henry licked his lips and nodded quickly. "Yes, yes, she is free. Now give me the money. And you," the cowboy said, turning to Silas Gant. "You agree that all debts are paid and you have no claim on Miss Jordan or her father." Silas scowled but nodded. "For that much money, the debt is paid and then some." The cowboy placed the bills on the table, counting them out precisely. Henry Jordan snatched them up immediately, and Silas took his share with thick fingers. Before anyone could change their minds, the cowboy turned to Delilah and offered his hand. "My name is Zachary Owen. I have a horse outside. If you want to leave this place, I suggest we go now." Delilah stared at his outstretched hand, as if it were a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. She did not know this man, did not know his intentions, but anything had to be better than the fate that had been planned for her. She placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard, honest work, and nodded. "I am Delilah," she said softly. "And yes, I want to leave." Zachary led her toward the door, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back in a gesture that felt protective rather than possessive. Behind them, Henry Jordan was already calling for whiskey, not even sparing a glance for his daughter as she walked out of his life forever. The evening air felt like freedom after the suffocating atmosphere of the saloon. Delilah took a deep breath, feeling tears prick at her eyes but refusing to let them fall. Zachary led her to a beautiful chestnut mare tied at the hitching post, her coat gleaming even in the fading light. "This is Rosie," he said, untying the reins. "She is gentle, and she has carried me safely for 3 years now. I have a small ranch about 10 miles outside of town. You can stay there tonight, and tomorrow we can figure out what you want to do next." Delilah looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden motives. All she saw was genuine kindness and perhaps a hint of sadness, as if he understood what it meant to be desperate and alone. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Why did you pay so much money for someone you do not even know?" Zachary was quiet for a moment as he helped her up onto Rosie, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and Delilah felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "My mother was sold by her family when she was young," he said finally, as they started moving down the dusty street. "A good man bought her freedom and helped her start a new life. She never forgot his kindness, and she raised me to understand that sometimes you have the chance to change someone's whole world. I had the money. It seemed like the right thing to do." They rode in silence for a while, leaving the town behind as the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples over the California landscape. Delilah had lived in San Jose her whole life, but had rarely ventured beyond the town limits. The open spaces felt both frightening and exhilarating. "What happened to your mother?" she asked after a while. "She died when I was 15, Zachary said, and she could hear the old grief in his voice. "Fever took her in less than a week. My father had died years before, kicked by a horse when I was just a boy. It has been just me and the ranch ever since." "I am sorry," Delilah said, meaning it. She knew what it was like to lose a parent who actually loved you. Her mother had been kind and gentle, nothing like the bitter, angry man her father had become. "It gets easier," Zachary said. "The missing them part never goes away, but you learn to carry it better." The ranch came into view as the last light faded from the sky. It was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy house that looked like it had been built with care, a barn and several fenced pastures where Delilah could make out the shapes of cattle in the growing darkness. Zachary dismounted first and then helped her down, his hand steady on her waist. "I know this is all very strange," he said, leading Rosie toward the barn. "But I want you to know that you are safe here. The house has 2 bedrooms. You can have mine and I will sleep in the barn until we figure out a better arrangement." Delilah followed him, watching as he efficiently unsaddled Rosie and made sure she had food and water. Everything about his movements spoke of someone who worked hard and took pride in caring for his animals and his land. "You do not have to sleep in the barn," she said. "I do not want to put you out of your own home." Zachary smiled for the first time since she had met him, and the expression transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely warm. "I have slept in worse places. Besides, it would not be proper otherwise. People talk, especially in small communities like this." He led her to the house and lit several oil lamps, filling the space with golden light. The interior was simple but clean, with handmade furniture and a large stone fireplace. Delilah could see touches that spoke of a woman's presence long ago: an embroidered sampler on the wall, gingham curtains that had faded with age. "Your mother made these?" she asked, touching the curtains gently. "She did," Zachary said. "I could never bring myself to take them down. There is a pump outside for water, and I have some bread and cheese if you are hungry. It is not much, but it will keep until morning when I can make a proper breakfast." Delilah realized she was starving. She had not eaten since early morning, and the stress of the day had left her feeling hollow and shaky. She accepted the simple meal gratefully, sitting at the wooden table while Zachary moved around the kitchen with surprising ease for a man living alone. "Can I ask you something?" she said between bites of bread. "That money you paid, that was a lot, more than most cowboys make in months." Zachary sat down across from her with his own plate. "I have been saving for a while. I do well enough with the cattle, and I do not spend much. I had been thinking about expanding the ranch, maybe buying more land, but that can wait. Some things are more important than property." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Delilah found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. He had strong, honest features and hands that were scarred and calloused from work. There was a kindness in his eyes that made her feel something she had not felt in years: hope. "What will you do now?" Zachary asked gently. "Do you have any other family, friends who might take you in?" Delilah shook her head. "My mother's family disowned her when she married my father. They said he was not good enough for her, and they were right, but she loved him anyway. Or at least she loved the man he used to be before the drink took him. As for friends, well, when your father is the town drunk, people tend to keep their distance." "You could stay here," Zachary said, then quickly added, "I mean, just until you figure out what you want to do. I could use some help around the ranch, someone to help with the cooking and the garden. I would pay you fair wages, and you would have a safe place to sleep." Delilah considered his offer. She had no money, no skills beyond keeping house, and no prospects. More than that, she found herself wanting to stay, wanting to know more about this man who had paid a small fortune to free a stranger. "I would like that," she said. "Thank you, Zachary, for everything. You can call me Zach," he said with another one of those transforming smiles. "Most people do." That night, Delilah lay in Zachary's bed, which smelled faintly of leather and sage, and stared at the ceiling. She could hardly believe that this morning she had woken up in her father's shabby house, and now she was here, free for the first time in her life. She thought about Zachary sleeping in the barn and felt a strange mixture of gratitude and something else, something warmer that she was not quite ready to name. The next few weeks fell into an easy rhythm. Delilah threw herself into making the ranch house into a proper home again. She scrubbed floors and windows, aired out musty linens, and planted vegetables in the overgrown garden. Zachary had not been lying about his cooking skills, but she took over the kitchen anyway, making hearty meals that put weight back on her thin frame and color in her cheeks. They worked side by side in easy companionship, Delilah learning the rhythms of ranch life while Zachary proved to be a patient and kind teacher. He showed her how to collect eggs from the chickens he kept, how to churn butter, and how to mend tack. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. Delilah learned that Zachary was 26 years old and had been running the ranch alone since he was 17. He had taught himself to read using his mother's few precious books, and he had a quiet intelligence that came from observation rather than formal schooling. He loved the land with a fierce devotion, and he treated his animals with a gentleness that made Delilah's heart ache. For his part, Zachary discovered that Delilah had a quick wit and a talent for making even mundane tasks feel meaningful. She sang while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her, and the sound filled the house with life it had not known in years. She was also stronger than she looked, not afraid of hard work, and she had opinions about everything from politics to the best way to make biscuits. It was in the 5th week of her stay that things shifted between them. Zachary had been out mending fences all day, and he came back to the house exhausted and covered in dust. Delilah had made a special dinner, roasted chicken with vegetables from the garden, and she had even managed to bake an apple pie with fruit from the scraggly trees behind the barn. "This is incredible," Zachary said, taking his second helping. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother," Delilah said, feeling the familiar pang of loss. "She said that feeding someone was an act of love and that every meal should be made with care." Zachary set down his fork and looked at her across the table. In the lamplight, his blue eyes were almost navy, intense and focused entirely on her. "Delilah," he said slowly, as if testing the weight of what he was about to say, "I need to tell you something." Her heart started beating faster. "What is it?" "When I first saw you in that saloon, I thought I was just doing the right thing, helping someone who needed help the way someone once helped my mother. But these past weeks, having you here, I have realized that it was more than that. I think some part of me knew the moment I saw you that you were going to change my life." Delilah felt her breath catch. "Zach, I am not saying this to make you feel obligated," he continued quickly. "You do not owe me anything. You are free to leave whenever you want. But I need you to know that I have feelings for you. Real feelings. You have made this house a home again, and I do not want to imagine going back to the way things were before." For a moment, Delilah could not speak. She had been fighting her own growing feelings for weeks, telling herself it was just gratitude, just the natural response to kindness after so much cruelty. But the truth was that she looked forward to seeing his smile every morning, that her heart raced when their hands accidentally touched, that she dreamed about what it might be like if he kissed her. "I have feelings for you too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was afraid to say anything because I did not want you to think I was just grateful or obligated. But Zach, you are the kindest, most decent man I have ever known, and yes, you have changed my life completely." Zachary stood up and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. He took her hands in his touch gentle and warm. "I know it has only been a few weeks," he said, "and I do not want to rush you into anything. But I want you to know that my intentions are honorable. When I look at you, I see my future. I see us building a life together, filling this house with love and maybe someday with children. I see growing old with you, watching sunsets from this porch for the next 50 years. Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I see that too," she whispered. "I was so scared that I was just imagining it, that I was just desperate for any kind of happiness." "You are not imagining anything," Zachary said, reaching up to cup her face in his hands. "May I kiss you?" Delilah nodded, and when his lips met hers, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, and then it deepened into something that spoke of promise and passion, and a future that suddenly seemed bright and full of possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I think I started falling in love with you that first night," Delilah admitted, resting her forehead against his. "When you gave up your own bed and slept in the barn, no one had ever put my comfort before their own like that." "Well, I should probably mention that I moved back into the house about a week ago, Zachary said with a sheepish grin. I have been sleeping on the floor in the parlor. The barn was comfortable enough, but I wanted to be closer in case you needed anything. Delilah laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to surprise them both. You have been sleeping on the floor. Zach, that is ridiculous. It was worth it, he said simply. Everything has been worth it. They courted properly after that, despite living under the same roof. Zachary was careful about propriety, never pushing for more than Delilah was ready to give. He brought her wildflowers from the hills and taught her to ride Rosie so she could explore the land. They went into town together on Saturdays, and Zachary made it clear to everyone they met that Delilah was under his protection and that his intentions were serious. Some people gossiped, of course. The story of how Zachary had bought Delilah's freedom from her father had spread, and there were those who whispered that she was no better than she should be. But Zachary faced down the gossips with quiet dignity, and Delilah held her head high. She had nothing to be ashamed of. 3 months after that first night, Zachary took Delilah on a picnic to a beautiful spot overlooking a valley. The autumn air was crisp and clear, and the leaves on the scattered oak trees were turning gold. They ate sandwiches and drank sweet tea, and then Zachary pulled a small box from his pocket. "Delilah Jordan," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I know we have not known each other long by some people's standards, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you with everything I am. Will you marry me?" Delilah felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded vigorously. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." "I love you too, Zach, more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her until she was dizzy with happiness. They lay on the blanket together, looking up at the clouds and talking about their future. They would marry as soon as possible, they decided. Neither wanted to wait. The wedding took place on a sunny November morning in 1878 at the small church in San Jose. Zachary had invited everyone he knew, wanting to celebrate openly and proudly. Delilah wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with lace that Zachary had bought from the general store. She had never felt more beautiful. Henry Jordan did not attend. Delilah had seen him once from a distance since that night in the saloon, stumbling drunk down the street. He had not acknowledged her, and she had not approached him. She had made her peace with the fact that her father was lost to her, perhaps had been lost for years. It still hurt, but the pain was bearable now that she had Zachary and the promise of a new family. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. Zachary's voice shook slightly as he said his vows, promising to love and cherish Delilah for the rest of his days. Delilah spoke her own vows clearly, wanting everyone to hear her promise to stand by Zachary through whatever life brought them. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food provided by neighbors who had come to genuinely care for the young couple. There was music and dancing, and Delilah felt like she was floating. That night, alone together for the first time as husband and wife, Zachary carried Delilah over the threshold of their home. He set her down gently in the bedroom, which she had filled with candles that cast everything in warm, flickering light. "Are you nervous?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "A little," she admitted, "but mostly I am happy, so incredibly happy." Zachary kissed her softly. "We will take this as slowly as you need. We have the rest of our lives together." But Delilah did not want to go slowly. She had waited long enough for happiness, had endured enough fear and uncertainty. She wanted to be completely his, to seal their union in every way possible. She kissed him back with a passion that surprised them both, and they came together with a mixture of tenderness and desire that felt absolutely right. Later, lying in each other's arms, Delilah traced patterns on Zachary's chest and marveled at how much her life had changed. 5 months ago, she had been trapped and hopeless. Now she was cherished and free, married to a man who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, running his fingers through her loose hair. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive," she said. "And I am thinking about how strange it is that the worst night of my life led to the best thing that ever happened to me." "I believe things happen for a reason," Zachary said. "Maybe we were meant to find each other, even if the circumstances were not ideal." "You ever regret it?" Delilah asked. "Spending all that money, it was your savings, your future plans." Zachary turned to face her, his expression serious. "Not for a single second." "You are my future plans, Delilah. Everything I want starts and ends with you." The first year of their marriage was full of joy and hard work. They expanded the ranch, buying more cattle with the profits from their sales. Delilah proved to have a talent for managing the books and dealing with buyers, and together they made a formidable team. The house rang with laughter and love, and their neighbors often commented on how well matched they were. In the spring of 1880, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, and then a smile spread across his face that was brighter than the sun. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Delilah said, laughing as he swept her up in his arms and spun her around. "Careful, you will make me dizzy." "I am going to be a father," Zachary said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "I promise I will be the best father I can be. Our child will know nothing but love and security." Delilah covered his hand with hers. "I know you will. You are already the best man I know." The pregnancy was not easy. Delilah suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Zachary fretted over her constantly. He hired a woman from town to help with the housework, so Delilah could rest, and he read everything he could find about childbirth and infant care. His devotion never wavered, even when Delilah was cranky and uncomfortable in the later months. Their son was born on a cold January night in 1881, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. Zachary was there for the birth, holding Delilah's hand and encouraging her through the pain. When the midwife placed the baby in Delilah's arms, both parents wept with joy. "He is perfect," Delilah whispered, touching the baby's tiny fingers. "Look at him, Zach. He has your eyes." "And your stubborn chin," Zachary said with a laugh, kissing first the baby and then Delilah. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Delilah knew exactly what felt right. "Daniel," she said. "Daniel Owen. It means God is my judge. He will grow up knowing that he is loved unconditionally, that he never has to earn our approval or live in fear." "Daniel," Zachary repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Welcome to the world, Daniel Owen. Your mother and I have been waiting for you." Parenthood brought new challenges and new joys. Daniel was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to smile at everything. Zachary was a natural father, patient and loving, and he helped with everything from diaper changes to midnight feedings. Delilah watched him with their son and fell even more deeply in love with her husband. As Daniel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Zachary hired 2 ranch hands to help with the expanding herd, and Delilah managed the household and the accounts with quiet efficiency. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. One afternoon when Daniel was 2 years old, Delilah was in town buying supplies when she ran into Silas Gant. She had not seen him since that night in the saloon, and the sight of him made her stomach clench with remembered fear. He looked older and meaner, if that was possible, and his eyes held recognition when he saw her. "Well, well," he said, stepping into her path. "If it is not the girl that Cowboy bought, how is married life treating you?" Delilah lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. "It is treating me very well, thank you. Now if you will excuse me, I have shopping to do." Silas did not move. "That Cowboy made a fool of me that night. Paying triple when I had already agreed to terms made me look weak." "That is not my concern," Delilah said firmly. "The transaction was completed fairly. You have no claim on me or my family." "Maybe not," Silas said with an ugly smile. "But I hear your father is still alive, still drinking himself to death. Maybe I should pay him a visit, see if he has any other assets he would like to sell." The threat was clear, and Delilah felt a chill run down her spine. But before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Zachary appeared beside Delilah, Daniel perched on his hip. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. He placed his free hand on the small of Delilah's back, a gesture of support and protection. Silas Gant looked at Zachary and apparently decided that whatever satisfaction he might get from harassing Delilah was not worth the confrontation. He tipped his hat mockingly and stepped aside. "No problem at all," he said. "Just having a friendly conversation with an old acquaintance." "Good," Zachary said. "I would hate to think anyone was bothering my wife. That would not end well for them." They watched Silas walk away, and Delilah released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Daniel reached for her, and she took him gratefully, holding him close. "Are you all right?" Zachary asked, his eyes full of concern. "I am now," Delilah said. "Thank you for being here." "Always," Zachary said simply. "I will always be here." That night, after Daniel was asleep, they talked about the encounter. Zachary wanted to confront Silas formally, to make it clear that any threats against their family would be met with serious consequences. Delilah agreed, but she also suggested something else. "I think we should try to help my father," she said quietly. "Not because he deserves it, but because he is still my father. Maybe if he had help, if someone offered him a way out of the bottle, he might take it." Zachary was quiet for a long moment. "That is very generous of you, considering what he did." "I know," Delilah said. "But I do not want to carry anger and resentment for the rest of my life. And I do not want Daniel to grow up knowing that his grandfather died alone in a gutter because we did not try to help." So they tried. Zachary went to Henry Jordan and offered him work on the ranch, with the condition that he stay sober. For a few weeks, it seemed to work. Henry showed up every morning and did the work assigned to him, and he seemed almost like the man Delilah remembered from her childhood. But the pull of alcohol was too strong. One day he did not show up, and when Zachary went looking for him, he found Henry passed out in an alley behind the saloon. They tried twice more, but the pattern repeated itself. Finally, Delilah had to accept that her father did not want to be saved, that he had made his choice and there was nothing she could do to change it. It hurt, but it was also freeing in a way. She had done what she could. The rest was up to him. Henry Jordan died in the winter of 1883, found frozen in an alley after a night of drinking. Delilah cried when she heard the news, mourning not the man her father had become, but the father he could have been. Zachary held her while she grieved, and when she was ready, he helped her arrange a simple burial. "You think he ever regretted it?" Delilah asked at the graveside with only her, Zachary, and the minister present. "Selling me that night." "I think he was too far gone to regret anything," Zachary said gently. "But if there is an afterlife, I hope he knows now what a remarkable daughter he had, and what a fool he was to trade you for anything." Life moved on, as it always does. Delilah and Zachary had 3 more children over the next several years. A daughter they named Margaret in 1883, another son named Thomas in 1885, and a second daughter named Caroline in 1888. The house was full of noise and laughter, and the ranch continued to grow and prosper. Daniel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and the animals. Margaret was fierce and independent, always ready to challenge her brothers to races and climbing contests. Thomas was gentle and artistic, preferring to draw and read rather than work with the cattle. Caroline was still a baby, but she already showed signs of having her mother's determination. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Delilah with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with trusted neighbors and spent a week exploring the city, staying in a nice hotel and dining in restaurants. It was a chance to be just husband and wife again, to remember the couple they had been before the demands of parenthood. On their last night, sitting on the balcony of their hotel room and watching the lights of the city, Delilah reflected on how far they had come. "You remember that first night?" she asked, leaning against Zachary's shoulder. "When you brought me to the ranch and gave me your bed?" "I remember everything about that night," Zachary said. "I remember thinking that you were the bravest person I had ever met, standing there in that saloon with your head held high even though you were terrified. I remember the way you looked at me when I offered you my hand, like you could not believe anyone would help you." "I could not believe it," Delilah said. "I still cannot believe it sometimes, that you gave up your savings and your plans for a complete stranger." "You were never a stranger," Zachary said, turning to cup her face in his hands. "You were my future, even before I knew your name. These 10 years have been the happiest of my life, Delilah. You and our children are everything to me." "And you are everything to me," Delilah said, kissing him deeply. "You saved me that night, Zach, not just from Selah's Gant or from my father, but from a life without hope. You showed me what real love looks like, what it means to be cherished and valued." "You saved me too," Zachary said. "I was existing before you came, just going through the motions. You taught me how to really live, how to fill a house with joy and laughter. Everything good in my life comes from you." They made love that night with the passion of newlyweds and the deep connection of a couple who had built a life together through hard work and devotion. The next morning they returned to the ranch, eager to see their children and resume their regular life. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and celebrations. Daniel took over more responsibility on the ranch as he grew older, showing a natural aptitude for working with cattle and managing men. Margaret shocked everyone by announcing at 16 that she wanted to become a teacher, and Delilah and Zachary supported her dream wholeheartedly, sending her to a teaching college in Sacramento. Thomas discovered a talent for carpentry and began making beautiful furniture that people traveled from miles around to buy. Caroline was still finding her path, but at 10 years old, she already showed signs of having her mother's head for business. On a warm evening in May of 1895, Delilah and Zachary sat on their porch and watched the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. They were in their late 30s now, with streaks of gray in their hair and lines on their faces that spoke of years of laughter and occasional worry. Their children were grown or nearly so, and the ranch was more successful than they had ever dreamed. "You ever think about that night in the saloon?" Delilah asked, reaching for Zachary's hand. "Sometimes," he admitted. usually when I am counting my blessings. If I had not been there that night, if I had not decided to play cards at that particular table, our whole lives would be different. Do you think it was fate? Delilah asked. Or just luck? I think it was love, Zachary said. Not love at first sight maybe, but love waiting to happen. Two people who needed each other finding their way to the same place at the same time. Delilah rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I am glad you paid triple, she said with a smile. I would have hated to be a bargain. Zachary laughed, the sound warm and familiar. You were worth 10 times what I paid, 100 times. Everything I have and everything I am would not be enough to equal what you have given me. They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. From inside the house, they could hear Caroline practicing her piano, the notes floating out through the open windows. Daniel was in the barn checking on a mare about to foal, and Thomas was in his workshop putting the finishing touches on a rocking chair for Margaret's first baby, due in 2 months. This was their life, built from a single act of compassion and nurtured through years of love and hard work. It had not always been easy. They had faced droughts and harsh winters, sick animals and difficult harvests. They had buried parents and friends, weathered gossip and judgment, and learned to navigate the complex demands of running a ranch and raising a family. But through it all, they had each other. Every morning, Delilah woke up grateful for another day with the man who had freed her in every possible way. Every night, Zachary fell asleep knowing that he had found his purpose in loving and being loved by an extraordinary woman. Years later, when they were old and their children had children of their own, people would ask Delilah about that night in the saloon. They wanted to know if she had been scared, if she had known immediately that Zachary was special, if she believed in love at first sight. Delilah would smile her gentle smile and tell them the truth, that she had been terrified and hopeful in equal measure, that she had not known what to think of the tall cowboy who paid triple her price and asked for nothing in return, that love had not been immediate, but had grown slowly and steadily like a seedling reaching for the sun. She would tell them about the first meal they shared, the first time he made her laugh, the first kiss that promised a future she had never dared to imagine. She would tell them about learning to trust again, about discovering that she was worthy of love and respect, about building a life with someone who saw her not as property or obligation, but as an equal partner. And she would tell them that every single day since that September night in 1878, she had thanked whatever force or fortune or fate had put her in that saloon, at that table, at exactly the moment when Zachary Owen walked into her life and changed it forever. Zachary, for his part, would say that paying triple was the smartest investment he ever made, because it bought him not just a wife but a partner, a friend, a lover, and the mother of his children. It bought him a lifetime of happiness, a house full of love, and the knowledge that he had made a difference in at least one person's life. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Delilah and Zachary renewed their vows. Delilah was 70 years old now, her dark hair turned silver, but Zachary still looked at her with the same devotion he had shown that first night. Zachary was 76, moving a little slower but still strong and steady, still the foundation on which their family was built. I, Zachary Owen, take you, Delilah Jordan Owen, to be my wife, he said, his voice carrying clearly despite his age. I took you as my wife 50 years ago, and I have not regretted it for a single moment. You have been my greatest adventure, my deepest love, and my most precious gift. I promise to love you for whatever time we have left, whether that is 50 more years or 50 more days. I, Delilah Jordan Owen, take you, Zachary Owen, To be my husband, Delilah said, tears streaming down her lined face. You freed me from chains I did not even know I was wearing. You showed me what love really means, what family really means, what home really means. You have been my rock, my shelter, and my greatest joy. I promise to love you until my last breath and beyond, into whatever comes next. They kissed as their family applauded. And in that moment, they were not old people celebrating a milestone, but two young people finding each other in a smoky saloon, reaching across a divide of fear and uncertainty to grasp hands and build something beautiful together. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's management, though Zachary and Delilah remained involved in small ways, offering advice and enjoying their grandchildren. Margaret's teaching career flourished, and she eventually became the principal of a school in San Jose. Thomas's furniture became famous throughout California, and pieces bearing his mark were treasured as heirlooms. Caroline married a banker and became a prominent businesswoman in Sacramento, managing investments and breaking barriers for women in finance. Zachary Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1905, at the age of 86. Delilah held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering words of love and gratitude. He smiled as he died, his last sight being the face of the woman he had loved for 56 years. Delilah lived for 3 more years, surrounded by her children and their families. She spent her final years telling stories about their father, making sure that every grandchild and great-grandchild knew about the cowboy who had paid triple to free a young woman, and then had spent his life proving that some people really do love without condition or expectation. She died on a warm September evening in 1908, almost exactly 30 years to the day after that fateful night in the saloon. Her last words were Zachary's name, and those who were with her said she smiled as if seeing someone beloved. They buried her next to Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, Delilah Jordan Owen. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, she was freed by love and lived every day in gratitude. The ranch remained in the Owen family for generations, and the story of how it all began was passed down like a precious heirloom. Children grew up hearing about the night Zachary Owen walked into a saloon, saw an injustice, and chose to act. They learned that sometimes love is not just a feeling but a decision, a choice to stand up and do the right thing even when it costs you everything you have saved. And they learned that from the darkest moments can come the brightest futures, that from desperation and despair can grow hope and joy, and that sometimes, just sometimes, fairy tales do come true in the dusty streets of a California town, when the right two people find each other at exactly the right moment and decide to build something beautiful together.